We want to welcome you to the PAT 3 test. This test is designed for more advanced players who have completed the PAT 2 test with at least 800 points. There are some regional billiard players who have completed PAT 3, but generally this is a test designed for the major leagues, players competing at a national or international level. We are starting with an exercise that is similar to an exercise in PAT 2. We have the cue ball down here. Up here we have two balls that are 2 ball widths apart. In the PAT 1 test, we had to shoot between them with speed 2. In the PAT 2 test with speed 3. And now we have to do it with speed 4. That means down and back again, without touching either of those balls. You don't have to be successful every time. The passing average is 1.5 for 3 shots, so you should be making at least half of these. There are things here affecting a shot like this that are difficult to compensate for. Slight discrepancies of the table. A ball will sometimes wobble a little bit before it stops rolling. Sometimes the grain of the felt will even cause the path of the ball to minutely deviate, and so on. That is why we say you should make half the shots at speed 4. You have to be quite good to even make half of them. Granted, this is a shot that you would never have to make in a real game, but it does give you a lot of inner confidence when you know that you can shoot straight, even over long distances. Don't underestimate the value of that inner confidence. So let's give it a try. Think of the basic principles that we have already learned. I hold the cue at its balance point and let it aim itself. All I really have to do is be careful to hit the cue ball squarely and follow through properly. So we don't want to forget that this is not just about going through the balls 4 times. Rather, we still have to make sure to play speed 4. This stroke was too strong. It was speed 4.5. So even though I didn't touch the 2 balls, it doesn't count. That's why we want to watch Thorsten, our world champion, to see how he solves this.
Now we've seen the exercise for straightness in the test. Now let's look at effectiveness. As in the previous tests, we will work with draw shots and follow shots, although follow shots are actually too easy for the test. That means we will only be testing effectiveness with draw shots. We set up the exercise similarly as in the previous tests. To the right and to the left, 3 balls, half a ball width apart from each other. And the cue ball rests in the line with the first diamond. The position area that we want to play into this time is only a half diamond wide, and we don't want to touch the cushion, with one exception. Playing the outside ball, you can touch the long rail cushion if you find it necessary. Your stroke has to be of very high quality, and you also need quite a bit of self-confidence. I think we are all familiar with shots like these, the ones that really get on your nerves. They are over such a long distance, with the right amount of spin, you think to yourself, I hope this works. You need to have faith in your abilities. You need to know that when you strike the cue ball low, that it will return to you and the distance. Well, that is why we have this exercise in this test, so that we know how far it will return. In this case, 30 plus 15, well, 45 centimeters. So let's give it a try. Okay, that shouldn't have hit the cushion, so let's try another one. The standard number of points for this exercise is 10 points. You get 1 point for pocketing the ball and 1 for properly positioning the cue ball. So now I positioned the cue ball better. So now let's see if a world champion can do it better than the coach for the national team. I sure hope so.
Now that we've seen how Thorsten did it, we would like to emphasize one thing about the exercise. This exercise is not about putting as much backspin on the ball as possible. You are not being requested to draw the cue ball back to the back cushion and send it forth again. This exercise is about being able to put an effect on the ball and dose it properly, even over long distances. You will also notice with an exercise like this just how important it is to work on straightness. If you were able to successfully complete the last exercise with speed 4, then you will have a definite advantage when it comes to pocketing this ball with a well-dosed draw shot. On the other hand, if you had difficulty with the last exercise, let's say with speed 4 that the ball would deviate about a diamond away from a perfectly straight line, then you will also have more difficulty pocketing this draw shot. These drills are designed to help us develop the ability to shoot accurately over longer distances and at higher speeds. So there's really not much more to say concerning draw shots. We have covered all the important aspects already in Part 1 and Part 2. They were, among other things, the proper stance, working with the one-handed stroke, a smooth stroke, following through until the anatomical end of the stroke. And if you can do that, then all you have to do is strike the cue ball low for a draw shot, high for a follow shot. The stroke is always the same.
These principles are so important that I think we should demonstrate what actually happens when we make these shots. Ralph has already mentioned the two most important aspects of the shot. On the one hand, the proper stance, working with a one-handed stroke. On the other hand, a good stroke with a necessary effect on the ball. We have discussed these things explicitly in Part 1 and Part 2, but let's just quickly review. Let's look at the one-handed stroke again. How did that work? We held our cue at its balance point. We stood with our shoulders square, parallel to the table, and relaxed, letting the cue hang the way it wants. We then noticed how the cue turned. Then we turned our body to get the cue in line with the ball, taking our personal, anatomically correct stance, or what we like to call it, our zero stance. Then we moved to the ball until we were above it, and then we bent at the waist. Then all we did was shoot it in the pocket. That was the first exercise to find our personal zero stance. Then we had the classic exercise to work on our stroke. We had set up 16 balls, but for now we will settle for 4.
Und schon wird es ein Zugball, was natürlich vollkommen richtig ist. Dazu muss man eigentlich nur noch beachten, wir denken an unsere zweite Basisübung, 16 Kugeln nebeneinander.
Then we set our bridge at a proper distance from the cue ball, not in the dimension that some pool players do, with a distance of at least 1 diamond, sometimes 1.5. The distance from bridge to cue ball should be under 1 diamond, or somewhere between 15 and 25 centimeters, whatever is comfortable for you. Then we want to recall the length of our stroke from an anatomical viewpoint. It should be no longer than the distance from our elbow to the point where we hold the cue. The stroke stops naturally at this distance, unless of course we follow through with our upper arm, which is okay as long as we are standing correctly. Then our stroke should accelerate until the anatomical end of the stroke. That means that we don't slow the stroke down at ball contact, rather we accelerate through until the end of the stroke. So our stroke is completely through the ball. We accelerate through the ball. And sometimes we miss the pocket. These are the fundamental requirements that we have to master in order to then put the desired qualities or effects into our shot. If you're still having difficulties with these things, then I would recommend, just as Ralph did, that you work with the first 2 DVDs. There we discuss these drills in greater detail, so you have everything you need to develop these skills.
This exercise that Andreas just demonstrated with 4 balls should be done with a whole row of balls. And you should do this between 5,000 and 10,000 times. Why? Sports that demand a high level of precision and dexterity from the players require high repetition training. If you do that, if you work on your stroke with this exercise 5,000 times, even 10,000 times. Not as quick as you can to get it over with, but as accurately as you can to develop a perfect stroke. Then when you go to make that draw shot like the one shown before, you will make it. It will be unavoidable. It will be instinct. So those are the aspects of draw shots and straightness that we want to mention here. We don't need to get into follow shots in Part 3. There are other exercises that demand more of us that we want to get into. Let's take a look at some small position drills. That means that we are working on the ability to move the cue ball accurately in small areas. There are 2 important exercises that we will work with. We set up the first exercise like this. The 8 ball on the foot spot. Then I set up the other balls in order. 1, 2, 3. So that we are reminded that we have to play the balls in order.
Muss auch hier der Reihenfolge nach gespielt werden. Ja. So. Achte drauf beim Aufbauen, dass
Be careful not to cover the 8 ball. Keep a little space between the 8 ball and the other balls. The exercise should not be impossible to solve. So,
So,
12, 13, 14, 15. We put the cue ball here.
Die Weiße dahin. Ball in Hand am Anfang. Bemüht euch darum,
And then you want to keep the cue ball in this small area here, playing position from one ball to the next.
und quasi euch von Ball zu Ball hier Position zu spielen. Die Regel gilt, dass
One
ihr
important
keine
rule:
anderen Kugeln,
you are only allowed to hit the object ball that you are trying to
wenn
pocket.
dem so ist, wenn ihr eine
Your
Kugel
cue ball
verlegt,
should not hit another ball.
Kugel berührt,
If you do, then the pocketed
zählt
ball does
die
not
dabei
count.
gelochte Kugel nicht mehr. Und wir schauen
In a
uns
second,
das
we'll
jetzt
watch how
gleich
Torsten
noch mal
does this exercise.
beim Thorsten an, weil hier ist jetzt auch gleich
The pocket is full anyway. That one didn't even go in.
das heißt, die geht eh nicht mehr rein. Entsprechend schauen
That
wir
was
uns
done
das
with
jetzt
7
auch mal an. Das
balls.
war jetzt quasi eine
The desired
Aufgabe
value
mit
here
7 Kugeln.
is 10, so this was a
Der
low
Sollwert
passing
liegt
score.
bei 10. Das heißt, ich war hier natürlich im unteren Bereich und wir schauen uns natürlich mal an, wie das beim Thorsten der Fall ist.
So now that we have seen how Torsten completed the first exercise in the small position area, let's look at the second one. The second one is distinctly harder than the first. This is one of the exercises on the test that most people don't really like. This drill requires all the balls. You set them up in a long line. The balls are a distance of a half a ball apart from each other, as well as the cushion, and then you set up a nice long straight line along the table. Slowly but surely you begin to comprehend what you're supposed to do. You have to pocket the whole row of balls in order. We begin with ball in hand at the head of the table, and all we have to do is sink the balls up here in either one of the corner pockets.
Wir haben wieder Ball in Hand. Die Aufgabe ist also näherungsweise ähnlich wie gerade
You will
im
notice that the
ersten Test.
assignment here is
Nur wenn wir
similar to the
feststellen,
first
dass es
test.
irgendwie, ja,
It's just a bit more nasty.
das wären jetzt also wirklich nur 3 Punkte
That would
gewesen,
have
dann
only
sollten
been
wir
3 points, a disgraceful
Ergebnis
score.
Ergebnis
Hopefully we will now
das
see
gleiche
better
Thorsten.
results from
ein
Thorsten.
besseres Ergebnis sehen.
Now that we have seen how Thorsten did it, let's go into detail a bit and explain some things that are going on here.
Räumen wir das zunächst mal auf. Übrigens soll gesagt sein, dass
When you work on this exercise, then you should try to do it from both
durchaus
sides.
von beiden Seiten spielen soll. Zumindest im Training natürlich. Nicht immer hier anfangen, sondern im Training auch mal auf der anderen Seite anfangen. Immer im Wechsel, damit ihr nicht zu einseitig werdet in der Richtung. Das ist übrigens so eine
This exercise, by the way, I like to call my breakfast drill, because I used to do it first thing in the morning before I ate. This is one of my favorite drills.
Eigentlich recht gerne. Und wenn wir also hier mal schauen, wir fangen hier mit Ball in Hand an. Entsprechend.
Starting ball in hand, it is important to recognize when and how to use English.
Natürlich spielen wir wieder mit Effet hier und da, wenn wir es mal brauchen.
Let's see if we can get a good position here, for example.
Ich möchte mal versuchen, hier eine Situation zu erstellen. Nein, noch nicht ganz. Denkt dran.
And don't forget that you can use both corner pockets, especially if the cue ball comes to rest at a bad angle,
Zu gerade legt. Ja, das ist jetzt noch nicht
which
der
is
Fall.
not the case here.
Könnt entsprechend auch mal so Position spielen.
Now we are almost not playing the small position area anymore.
Aber wenn ihr zum Beispiel hier jetzt wenig Winkel
But if
habt,
the
dann
angle
könnt ihr
is
euch
bad,
auch mal
then you can use the other pocket.
entsprechend für die andere Tasche einstellen. Und dann könnt ihr auch mal natürlich die Kugeln entsprechend hier spielen. Und was ich eigentlich noch wesentlich erklären wollte hier ist, nehmen wir an,
So let's take, for example, the following situation. Let's say your angle here is too sharp. Not here, but there. So it is difficult to keep the cue ball here. It will roll too far over there. That's where English comes to play. With English, we can minimize the angle. What kind of English would you put on it? Some would say put a left-handed spin on it. Others would say to the right. The better answer is right English. Some say that left English would slow the cue ball down after contact with the object ball, but that effect is not very strong.
Dieser Effekt ist wirklich nicht groß, sondern größer ist eigentlich der andere Effekt. Mit dem rechten Effet habe ich ja auch noch die Abweichung auf der Objektkugel. Das heißt, mit dem rechten Effet wird
With right English, the 7 ball will be pushed slightly to the left,
das heißt, ich spiele die
which means that I have to aim to the right of the pocket with the 7 ball.
Ecke der Tasche und
But the English will cause it to fall in the pocket. That means that I have minimized the angle because the pocket is not here anymore, it's actually here. Okay? So I can only use this effect if I'm prepared to actually aim away from the pocket.
Dieser Effekt kann man natürlich nur nutzen, wenn man sich auch traut, die Kugel daneben zu zielen.
You will only do that if you have practiced it, and that is why exercises like this one are so important.
Indem ihr euch mit solchen Übungen auch wirklich befasst. Schauen wir uns das also mal an. Ich gebe rechtes Effet.
So let's see how this works. I'm going to play with right English and aim to the right, but it will still fall into the pocket.
Trotzdem noch fallen.
Now to see this effect even better, I'm going to do it from the other side. I'm just going to take a couple of balls with me and perform the exercise over here so that we can see it better. Once again, we line up the balls here.
Also hier wieder diese Reihe.
Let's just say that I've pocketed the first ball already, and let's say that I have to hit the 11 at a slight angle. So there's a strong possibility that the cue ball will run into the 10. I can reduce the angle here by using left English.
Hier schon kann ich den Winkel entschärfen, in diesem Fall durch linkes Effet.
The English on the cue ball will carry over to the 11, which will result in the 11 going a little to the right. That means that I can't aim directly at the pocket, because the ball would end up here. So if I'm going to use left English to reduce the angle of the cue ball's path after contact with the object ball, then I have to aim to the left of the pocket. Maybe you can see where I'm aiming. I'm actually aiming so that the 11 will miss the pocket if I don't use left English. But I do. And the 11 falls in the pocket. And I have a good position with my cue ball. That is angle reduction with English. I can do the same thing again here if I want to. I'm actually aiming away from the pocket, but the English brings it in.
Und diesen Effekt, den kann ich nutzen natürlich nur dann, wenn ich ihn
I can only use this effect when I'm familiar with it, when I have worked with it a lot. Then I'm confident enough to aim away from the pocket.
Geben zwar das Effet, aber sie rutscht dann eben über die rechte Hälfte aus und sie können die Weiße nicht wirklich gut halten.
This is a very important technique for working in the small position area. So now let's take a look at the big position area. As you've already seen, we like to divide the table into these areas. Of course, you can work in different areas or divide the game into more areas, creating a medium position area or something similar. But we find it most effective to work on our shots in a big and small position area. The techniques that we work on in the small position area are more important for games like 14-1. And the techniques that we work on in the big position area are important for games like 9-ball. In games like 8-ball, techniques from both areas are necessary. Let's get to our exercises. There are two that are important for the big position area. You put the 3-ball on the foot spot. The 15 on the cushion is a half a ball away from the cushion. And then we set up the rest of the balls in order, just like Andreas is doing. Here we should have 7 balls, all with the same spacing, just like down there. That means that we have 14 balls on the table. 1 is missing. That is the 1 ball, and it comes in front of the 3-ball, but not on the foot spot, because the space between them should be the same as with the balls down there. Then you begin with ball in hand here. Don't forget that you should only sink these balls in this pocket and those balls in that pocket. And you have to pocket the balls in order. That means that when you shoot the 1 ball, then you want to get position on the 2 ball. When I play the 2, then I want position, either directly or over 1 or 2 cushions, on the 3, up and down from one end of the table to the other. That is the big position area. Let's see how Thorsten, our world champion, solves this small problem in the big position area.
So now that we've seen how the first exercise is done, let's look at the second one. As you may recall from the earlier tests, the only difference between the two exercises is that you change the way the balls are set up. Always a half a ball away from the cushion. The spacing between the balls should always be the same. Keep the rows straight. Make sure the one ball is left over and it is set up in front of the three ball. We have the corner pockets at our disposal. That is to say, we can pocket these 7 balls in those 2 corner pockets, and the 8 balls here in those 2 corner pockets. As usual, you begin with ball in hand to play the one ball, and you play position. Don't forget that you get only points for properly pocketed balls. For instance, if I pocket the 1, 2, and 3 ball, but then I either miss with a 4 ball or I hit one of the other balls with my cue ball, then it doesn't count. So I would get 3 points for the first 3 balls, but for the 4th, I wouldn't get any. Let's watch how our world champion does it, and then we want to take a look at the exercise in more detail. So now that we have seen how elegantly Torsten can do these exercises, we want to take a minute and go back to the basics. We have made it clear that these exercises are for more advanced players, but the exercises also reveal that expertise relies heavily on the mastery of basic skills. The exercises we are working on right now are not difficult to understand. They just require a mastery of basic skills and techniques. Usually, when someone has difficulty with these exercises, it is just an indication that he should be getting back to basics. A large portion of the training that professionals do is just working on the fundamentals. This exercise, for example, is a perfect opportunity to work on our stroke. We work on our stroke as we are pocketing balls and playing position.
Position spielen zu können, Bälle zu versenken. Wir gehen also davon aus, wir haben unsere
We remember to take our anatomically correct stance at the table. We pay attention to our stroke, and so now we get to the assignment at hand. That is, to put the ball in the pocket and get position on the next one. We have described a stroke procedure in our previous DVDs that help us complete this assignment. Let's look at it again. The most important part of the stroke is getting the object ball into the pocket. So, the first perspective that we want to see is the object ball to the pocket. It is best if we visualize the ball rolling into the pocket. We have an image in our mind of how the ball looks rolling into the pocket. The second perspective, and just as important, is the view from the cue ball to the object ball. With these two perspectives, or subconscious, or our microprocessor, or our general, whatever we want to call it, can then bring to work out scenarios on how to play position on the next ball, perhaps using a draw shot of a follow shot. We consider our tangents and our possibilities with stop shots. We collect all the possibilities that we could eventually use.
Angewöhnen, unsere Kiss-Shot-Tangente zu sehen, wenn wir unsere beiden Positionen haben. Dass wir wissen, aha, da wird mein Druckball hingehen. Also da könnte ich mit
So, when we have these two perspectives, then there's a third that we want to consider that many players mistakenly think is the most important, our position. That is to say, we walk around the table and try to visualize how we want to see our next shot. Do we want to shoot the next ball at an angle, or as straight as possible? We're not trying to pick out a specific spot on the table that our cue ball should come to rest on. We want a perspective, not a spot. A specific spot is much too easy to miss. When we miss, then it feels like we made a mistake. Mistakes put us in a bad mood. A bad mood puts us under pressure, and when we're under pressure, then we make more mistakes. So now we have our perspectives, and what we want to do now is to take one of these possibilities and try to visualize it. Try to imagine it's happening. Don't make a technical analysis of the decision. Just do what your mind's eye sees and be confident that you can do it. When you go for a walk through your backyard, then you don't make a technical analysis of how you should make each step. You just do it. Now that I've done all this, then I just have to aim at my target. My target is not here. That is a big mistake that a lot of billiard players make. While they are shooting, they are looking at the position that they want to cue the ball. That changes your whole stroke. The target is always the object ball, or if we are playing off the cushion, then our target is a spot on the cushion. I don't look at my position perspective anymore. I have already envisioned it. I have imagined how my wrist will feel when I shoot. I know how hard my stroke should be. I know how the balls will sound when they contact. I know where they will roll. There's only one thing left for me to do. Down there is the end of my world. I take my stance as I have practiced it 1,000 times before. I make my stroke as I have practiced it 1,000 times before. And then I can first relax after the cue ball has come to rest. Then I can look at how well I've played position, not during the shot. That is not the right time to be thinking about if my position will be right or if I should somehow compensate. No, no, no. First, I have to make the shot. Now I can look and see how good or bad my position is. Now I am back at square one. But I'm playing consistent, balanced billiard. Ralph spoke earlier about angle reduction. What we need in this game is pressure reduction. We cannot turn difficult shots into simple ones. We can make simple shots more difficult. What we really want to do, though, is to put every shot into the same difficulty level. We want to give our game rhythm, make it consistent. I have a situation on the table, and so I get perspectives.
Hier komme ich mit meiner Weißen drauf.
I know that I would like to end up
Ich werde hier
here
drüben stehen wollen oder ich
or
werde hier
here.
stehen wollen. Ich kann mir meine Winkel angucken.
Do I
Möchte
want to
ich den
have an
Winkel
angle
genau
here
haben? Möchte
or
ich den
here?
Winkel haben, um über das kurze Eck zu stellen?
It is futile to look back and try to analyze how the shot would be if I had played a better position with a previous shot. I have a new situation that cannot be changed and has to be dealt with. Good billiard is played in the present, now, not in the past, 2 minutes ago. What could I have done? Nor is good billiard played in the future, in 5 minutes. Will I miss the next shot? We are playing in the now, which means that I still have the same assignment. I have visualized a plan. I see my target. I get in position. My focus is on the 2-ball. And now I can think about what has happened. Now I can look at what I have done. Maybe I didn't even want to turn it out this way, but I begin to get my perspectives again. Perhaps I've put myself in a difficult situation. I'm going to have to play this at a slight angle, but now is not the time to think about what it would be like if I had played differently. That doesn't change anything. The situation is the way it is, and our assignment still hasn't changed. I have a ball that I have to put in the pocket. I have a perspective from the cue ball. I have to find a solution for this assignment. I choose a possible solution, try to visualize the shot in my mind, and now I look at my target, calculate my angle, take my position, and stroke. Then the 4. Once again, that slight angle. I get my perspective from the cue ball to the object ball. How do I want to get position on the 5? Where do I want the cue ball to go? Do I want to send it back across the table? This is the way we try to keep a certain, constant rhythm in our game. Naturally, if we were in a real match, then we wouldn't necessarily have to make the next shot. If the next shot seemed too difficult, then we could also play safety. If we play safety, then it is important to keep that constant rhythm. The only thing that has changed is our assignment. We don't want to put the object ball in the pocket anymore. I'm not trying to get position on the next ball anymore, but the procedure is still the same. The rhythm is the same. Now I'm just getting perspective on a safety play for the 4 or the cue ball. In any case, we don't want to lament the previous shot. We just work with the situation at hand.
Mein Gott, so schwer hingestellt. Und warum? Es ist dieselbe Aufgabe. Man könnte sagen, gut, versuchen wir den Ball einfach mal durchpendeln zu lassen.
Here, I can try to hit the object ball thin and then send the cue ball back for position on the 5. So, I know my assignment. I see my target, I take my stance, and just do it. Same stroke, I could have also played safety, but not with a sense of resignation, as if I was giving up, rather with exactly the same feeling and the same rhythm as the other shots. It is only a different assignment. But even playing safety, I get my perspectives, I make my plan, I take my stance, I make my stroke.
Bin in Stellung gegangen, habe meinen Stoß gehalten, mein Fokus lag bei meinem Ball. Und so, denke ich, ist der einzige Weg,
This is necessary for playing over a long period of time, long sets, perhaps 14-1, a lot of balls. I need a method for my game to keep me focused, calm, and concentrated. We are certainly going to touch on this issue again, the points in the game where technical ability and inner mental strength intertwine.
Now we come to our next two exercises that deal with angle shots. Our confidence in our shooting should be built through these exercises. The exercise is set up like this. We put the 3 on the center spot, the 5 on the diamond, in the middle as well, the 4 in between, and we do the same over here. The cue ball is then placed on the head spot, and you make every shot from here. So the exercise is not about playing position, it's just about pocketing the balls. The rules go like this. You start with the 3, and you can decide if you put it in the right or in the left pocket, but the next ball you have to put in the other pocket. So if you shoot the 3 ball in the left pocket, then you have to sink the next ball in the right pocket, and the one after that in the left one. So you are always going back and forth. Before we watch Thorsten do this, I will just begin the exercise. We always start here. We are trying to minimize contact of the cue ball with the other balls. We continue with the 4 in the other pocket. Again, we are trying to make the shots without the cue ball hitting the other balls. There's no penalty in the test for doing this. That's just good play. Then the 5 over there. The 6 down there. And now if I make a mistake with the 7, so that was the first round of this exercise. In the first round, I pocketed 4 balls, the 3, 4, 5, and 6. I missed the 7. In the next round, I don't start at the beginning again. I start where I left off, with the 7. In this round, I still have the chance to score the full 7 balls. If I sink the last 3, then I can set up the first 4 again and complete the whole round. So every new round begins at the point where the last mistake was made. You'll notice that with this drill you are confronted with many different angles, including a very thin one at the end. I played that one a bit too thin. Let's see how Thorsten does this exercise.
ebenfalls für Winkelbälle.
Now, the next exercise for angle shots. The balls are set up on the third diamond from the head and the foot like this.
Und auf dieser Diamantenlinie wiederum. Ja?
The cue ball kisses this diamond here,
Immer Press an dem Diamanten gelegt und ich muss dann von
and I have to
hier
try to
aus
sink the balls
versuchen,
from here
Kugeln zu versenken.
and from here.
Dann von hier die Weiße. Es ist also diesmal immer der gleiche.
It is always the same angle, but it is a situation that we are often confronted with in billiard.
Mit dem wir auch oft im Spiel konfrontiert
For example,
werden.
if you are breaking in a game of 9-ball, and you aren't able to keep the cue ball in the middle of the table, and the one ball usually ends up out here somewhere, then a shot like this would be your first shot, and that is exactly what we want to work on here. Let's see how Torsten solves this problem. So now we want to go on to our next exercise. That should help us develop our accuracy, especially with long shots. We want to consistently be able to make long shots, long, straight shots, long, angle shots. The cue ball is in a very difficult position in this exercise. It is directly on the cushion. You set up the exercise like this. The 8 ball is in the middle. You put 7 balls to the left and 7 balls to the right. The outside balls should be at least a ball's width away. Otherwise, you would have to place the cue ball in the jaw of the pocket. Then you begin at one end of the row. It doesn't matter which end. And then you switch off with each set. The first set is on one side, the second set on the other side, the third set back on the side where you began, and so on. The cue ball should be directly on the cushion. You don't play position. Then you make a nice long shot in the corner pocket. Then you set up the cue ball again. And once again, a nice long shot in the corner pocket. You keep repeating this procedure until you make a mistake or until you have finished the exercise. And now let's take a look at how Torsten did this exercise.
So that was the first exercise with 15 balls and the cue ball on the cushion. Now we have another exercise with the cue ball still on the cushion, but the object balls are set up differently. Set up 5 balls up here. We put the 5, 1 ball width away from the cushion. The 9 ball is in the middle. The 7 goes exactly between the 5 and the 9. Then we put the 6 ball next to the other cushion, 1 ball width apart from it, and the 8 ball in between. The cue ball should be frozen on the middle of the short rail. Then we have to just pocket the balls in order 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All shots are made with the cue ball kissing the short rail in the middle. If we should miss a shot, then we begin where we left off. This exercise also gives us the opportunity to work with the difficult situation of having a cue ball frozen on the cushion. The most critical part of a shot like this is probably how you make your bridge. You will often observe billiard players doing the strangest things imaginable when they are confronted with a shot like this. The worst thing you can do is to form a bridge with a finger beneath the cue. Your cue is then much too high and the angle much too steep. It would almost be like shooting a jump ball, and you definitely would not have very much control over your shot. However you make your bridge, it will be somewhat back from the table on the rail. If you should have 1 or more fingers on the table is up to you. The important thing is not putting a finger under the cue and keeping the cue as low as possible. Usually an open bridge of some kind is preferred. What helps here is the fact that the cushions are generally lightly tapered toward the table. So you can use this slightly declining angle to keep yourself from holding your cue too low. And sliding over the top of the cue ball. If you keep these things in mind, then you may find shots with a cue ball frozen on the cushion just about as easy as shooting with a normal bridge. At least you have the advantage that the table won't wobble, but your bridge hand could. There are a couple other points that are very important to remember when you are shooting away from the cushion. One is keeping your eye focused on the object ball. For some reason, when the cue ball is on the cushion, perhaps because it is so close, many are tempted to focus their attention on the cue ball rather than the object ball. And that is why we miss shots like this very often. Then it is also important to keep your arm extended. Many billiard players will often bend their arms at the elbow when the cue ball is on the cushion. They move in on the ball. But you see what happens with my cue ball when I crouch like that? The tip rises. My stroke will be then more like a shoveling motion, and I definitely don't want that. I want to keep my arm extended. I want an open bridge set back a little from the cue ball, and then I want a straight, smooth stroke through the ball, remembering to keep my focus on the object ball. That is my target. So let's give it a try and see if this also works in the exercise. So now we will do the same thing with the 6 and then the 7. It is also important with these exercises to get your perspectives. Look at the shot you are about to make. Where do you want to hit the object ball? Take your time. Focus on the 6. We will do one more before we watch Thorsten do the drill.
So, wäre eher ein Verschossener gewesen.
And I missed it.
Das heißt, jetzt würde auch in der Übung
So if I was really taking the test, then that would be the ball that I would begin with again, the 7. But I would still be able to get all the points in the exercise. To do that, I would have to sink the 7, 8 and the 9, and then the 5 and the 6 again.
sodass wieder 5 Bälle möglich wären.
So let's see how Thorsten does it.
Thorsten gemacht hat.
There are a few important things to consider concerning these last two exercises. For example, if you practice these exercises over extended periods of time, shooting long balls across the table, let's say for half an hour at a time, then you will train your eye to focus on the object ball automatically. Training like that can be very strenuous, though. I've noticed that I will get headaches when I train like that. This is a good sign, though. That shows that you are really training your eye. Your focus rests on the spot that you want to hit on the object ball. It rests there for 1 or 2 seconds as you make your stroke. Your focus will be strengthened through this exercise, and that is something that you really need. Another problem that often occurs with drills like these, especially if you have difficulty with these shots, is that you begin to get discouraged. You may think that somebody like Efren Reyes or Thorsten Hohmann would never miss a shot like that. And to an extent, that's true. In tournaments, it is quite seldom that they miss shots like that. But when they would do an exercise like this, they would occasionally miss too. The exercise should just help us to develop abilities, to concentrate on the more important things. So if we are averaging with a score of 1 or 1.5, that would be very good. If you have an average like that in an exercise with 5 long balls, one after the other, then when you're playing a real game, when you only have 2 or 3 shots like that in a whole game, you will, in the course of time, not have a problem making those shots. You know what you have to concentrate on, and that's all you need for the shot.
Ja? Dann wäre hier vielleicht zu bemerken, dass ich hier einen relativ rhythmischen Anschwung.
Another point is that I prefer to swing the cue a few times before such long shots. And then, when you miss, don't forget that you then begin where you left off. That would mean that I would continue with the 7, then the 8, 9, then the 5, the 6 would be the last ball. The highest amount of balls that you can score in a set is 5, and you have 3 sets. It's not unusual to complete this exercise with an average of 1.
Okay.
So in the test there are 2 9-ball exercises that don't really need much explanation, so we will just observe how Torsten does them.
Hohmann spielt.
Those were the 9-ball exercises. Before we get to the bank shot exercises with Ralph, there is one necessary thing that we have to consider, and that is the behavior of balls that contact the cushion. This is our short cushion qualities discourse. We will start with an easy bank shot. We will set up a ball for a straight shot here along the line between these two diamonds. It is important with a shot like this that you don't aim at the diamond, rather you have to imagine the diamond being at the edge of the cushion, and you aim at that spot. The angle that the ball has approaching the cushion will be equal and opposite to the angle that the ball has leaving the cushion. They are reflective angles. That means that if I shoot this ball without putting too much force into it, and if I put no English on it, then the 8 should fall in this pocket. And it works. Now, in a game, there are a lot of deviations from these basic principles. To understand these deviations, we first must understand what actually happens when a ball is shot into a cushion. When a ball is shot into a cushion, then it is actually pressed into the cushion at the angle that it was shot from. That causes the cushion to bend. The cushion is compressed the most in the direction that the ball was shot from. This point, where the cushion is most compressed, is also the spot where there is the most resistant energy. The harder I shoot the ball into the cushion, the more resistant energy I create. This energy changes. It reduces the angle that the ball takes when it leaves the cushion. The angles are not equal and opposite anymore. The angle that the ball takes when it leaves the cushion does not reflect the angle that the ball had as it approached the cushion. It is smaller. So that means that when we make the same shot again, but we put more force into our stroke, then we can observe extreme deviations from the normal path that the ball would otherwise take. The harder you strike the ball, the more you will close the angle of the path that the ball will take as it leaves the cushion. Unfortunately, there is no rule that we can make for this, no formula, because every table is different. The cushions are actually made of vulcanized rubber, and so they can be different in their elasticity. The harder the constitution of the cushion is, the less the ball bouncing off of it will deviate. For comparative purposes, you could examine carom billiard, where the cushions are basically used as a means of transportation, and the ball is often struck softly to minimize deviations. When we are playing pool billiard and we shoot a bank shot, which we will be working on the next exercise, then we will often provoke these deviations to change angles. For example, if the balls aren't set up at this angle anymore, rather, it is a half a diamond further over here, and we don't use English, and we are trying to control the path of our cue ball, then we may decide to put a lot of force into our shot to keep the cue ball here in this line. So that is one quality of the cushions that we have to be aware of. They are force sensitive. The second quality that they have that we want to consider is cushions can drastically change the English that is on a ball. We can put English on this ball. When it contacts the object ball, then the English is transferred to the object ball. Let's set up the balls the way we did before. Then we observe how this works. We are going to shoot the cue ball with left English, and we are going to try to strike the object ball squarely with it, an otherwise straight shot. The left English, though, will direct the 8 ball to the right. That means that we should miss the pocket, even though we won't put much force into the stroke.
Ausgeschlossen eigentlich, dass wir den Ball noch senken können, auch wenn wir relativ weich spielen. Ja, hat sogar noch geklappt.
How about that?
Sehr, sehr knapp
It fell in. But you did see the difference in the path that the ball took. Let's examine this more closely. We have already said that English can be transferred from one ball to another. It is important to note that when English is passed from one ball to the next, that the next ball will rotate in the opposite direction. Try to imagine the two balls as two gears in a clockwork whose teeth intertwine. If the first gear turns clockwise, then the gear connected to it will turn counterclockwise. So if I put left English on the cue ball, then the object ball that it hits will have right English. Let's demonstrate this with a straight shot, but I'm going to put a lot of English on it.
Das heißt, man kann Bälle aus einem gerade geschossenen Ball mit viel Effet.
Okay, I guess that had to happen. Let's try again. An otherwise straight shot, but the object ball will have a lot of right English on it. Let's see what happens. That is an important attribute to understand, the transfer of English. I must admit that it's very difficult to develop or train these skills. It seems that being able to properly dose the amount of English necessary for a shot like this has a little something to do with gut instincts. The same is true of the next point we want to discuss, cross shots. An example would be a cross side with the 8. That is to say that I want to bring the 8 ball back to me and pocket it here in the side pocket. One way to do this would be to work with our reflecting angles. We could determine a spot on the cushion where the angle of the path that the 8 ball takes as it approaches the cushion is equal and opposite to the path leaving the cushion, and whose end is in the side pocket. Many players determine that spot through a mental exercise called mirror imaging. They image a mirror image of the billiard table right next to the actual table, and then they aim at the imagined side pocket on the mirror image. The whole concept is, in theory, quite good. The problem is that it usually doesn't work. Why? That is because of something that happens that we haven't talked about up until now on these DVDs. A phenomenon that we will call dynamic object ball English. Let's use this shot as an example. We're making a cross-side shot so that we are actually bringing the object ball back somewhat in the opposite direction of the cue ball. We are not putting any English on the cue ball. The object ball is motionless, and we now hit it with a cue ball. We don't hit it in the middle though. Rather, the cue ball hits the object ball off-center. That makes the object ball rotate. Since the object ball is hit on the left side, left from this perspective, then it will begin to rotate to the left. So basically, if I cut the object ball on the left, the object ball will then have left English. If I'm making a bank shot, though, then that English will shorten the angle of the ball as it leaves the cushion. In this situation here, I have to aim more to the right to compensate for the English.
Also an unserem gespiegelten Loch müssten wir sie praktisch rechts vorbeischießen, damit wir immer noch hier ins Loch kommen. Das Ganze ohne Effet.
So once you've tried that a few minutes, then you will probably also come to the conclusion that putting English on the cue ball doesn't really simplify much. If I put left English on the cue ball, then that would usually transfer over to the object ball as right English. Usually. Seeing, though, as I'm cutting the 8 ball on the left side, and that would usually create left English, the two forces cancel each other out, and the object ball remains relatively free of English. That, of course, presents new challenges when it comes to pocketing the ball.
und somit auch das Lochen Dimensionen komplizierter machen.
That is why we recommend that you initially work on these shots without English, but that you consider what forces are at play when you cut the object ball and what kind of English they will eventually create.
Oder man erzeugt Effet auf dem Ball.
This is a prime example.
Dürften dann die sein, die man eigentlich
I want to cut the 8-ball on the right, which will put right English on the 8. That will then make me aim at a different spot on the cushion in order to pocket the ball.
Das heißt, ich kann den Ball viel dünner hier in die Bande spielen, als ich eigentlich denke, ihn immer noch zu versenken. Das war ich doch tatsächlich ein bisschen
I
zu
cut
dünn
that a
auf dem
bit
Ball.
too thin.
So, also eigentlich eine ganz
This
andere
method
Art
is
und
slightly
Weise, den Ball zu
different than
spielen,
how many players would solve this shot. Many would immediately think in terms of putting English on the cue ball. Actually, though, that is not necessary. In the end, it is just an additional element in the shooting equation that, at the worst, complicates the whole thing even more, and at best, attempts to reduce another part of the equation to zero. This is especially true of cross shots, either where the object ball is shot across the path of the cue ball into the pocket, and the dynamic English would be conducive for bringing the object ball forward to the pocket, or where the object ball is shot with the direction of the cue ball, and the reversed English that the object ball takes on coming away from the cushion would cause the angle to be too thin. Now, to make the whole thing even more complicated, the harder I shoot the ball, the more resistant energy will be produced in the cushion and transferred to the ball. That energy, as we have learned, shortens the angle of the path that the ball takes as it leaves the cushion and minimizes English on the ball. When we take all this into consideration, then we have to conclude that there is basically no way of calculating a shot like this. It is best to just practice these shots and develop a feel for the forces involved. I would also like to recommend that when you practice these shots, that you keep the force of your stroke constant. The speed should remain the same for every shot. If you do this, then you will implant pictures in your mind that are realistic and that will positively influence your game. These pictures are closer to reality as our imagination will ever be. Now Ralph will show us the next exercise that is in the test, and he will certainly refer to some of the concepts that we have just discussed.
For this exercise, we want to set up the balls on the half diamond, that is to say, between the two diamonds, and they should be a ball width away from the cushion.
Die Kugeln auf, also immer zwischen den Diamanten eine Kugelbreite.
This is an old drill that Grady Matthews once showed me that I really appreciate and that I like to use now and then. Usually I begin here, by the 9. I set it here. Now I can apply many of the principles that Andreas discussed. I can apply more force to my stroke and play low, like this, to get position. Or I can reduce the force of my stroke, shoot softly and let the cue ball roll. It is just important that the cue ball comes back here to this position in the middle, because from here I have the most amount of options to choose from. I have a good position on many different balls, not just one.
Also ich spiele gar nicht auf eine ganz spezielle Kugelposition. Allerdings von hier aus kann man sehr schön weiter.
For example, here I have an angle over 3 diamonds. I would say about 3.4.
3 Diamanten, 3,4 würde ich mal sagen.
Half of that would be 1.9. That would mean that if the line was here, then I would have to play here to get the ball over there. This one is more narrow. It goes over there, which means that I would use more force to shorten the angle. My position is obvious here. I have the 3. I have a line from this diamond to the half diamond. That is the path if I don't put English on the ball and if I don't put much force on it either. The path at the moment would actually be there. So I have to use a little left English to achieve the desired path. Then here, if I take this line, then I have 2.5 diamonds. 1, 2.5. Half of that is 1.25, 1.25. That would work pretty well. That is with reflecting angles to the cushion, from the cushion. That will only happen if I use a light stroke and put a long spin on the ball, and a little to the left. Let's try that again.
Wichtig ist, wenn ihr diese Übung macht, dass ihr natürlich im Test
It is important to keep in mind that when you take the test, that you only have 3 sets, and you always start at the beginning. When you are training, though, then it is better to continue where you made a mistake. Then you work on the complete exercise, instead of your training being focused on the first balls. This will help you to accumulate experience with bank shots. This experience will not just help you to develop skill necessary for using the cushions when playing and pocketing balls. It will also help you to continue to develop a smooth stroke. Billiard players that are known for readily using cushions in their game, players who tend to shooting bank shots, are also known for having an extraordinarily smooth stroke. That is the case because a smooth stroke is essential for an accurate bank shot. When your stroke is too hard or too stiff, then the ball will tend to bounce off the cushion. So when you work with this exercise, you are not just working on bank shots, you are also developing a smooth, controlled, high-quality stroke. Now, getting back to the exercise. I should be able to make the 7. Yes, that should work. I have an angle here of about 1.6 diamonds. Half of that is 0.8. I'm going to need quite a bit of reverse English, in this case to the right. I played that pretty hard, and when it doesn't work, then I set up the ball again and try it once more. Then it is important to repeat this procedure until I can either make the shot or until I come to the conclusion that the shot cannot be made. It is impossible. The experience that you accumulate through an exercise like this will strengthen your discernment and your intuition so that you can better make decisions during a game. Intuition plays a large role during a game. We aren't measuring and calculating a lot when we are playing. Here, the situation is similar. I may have a problem with a double kiss there. See? To avoid it, I shot too far to the right. So now I have to try again. No, that didn't work either. If I try to hit it more directly, then it will definitely double kiss. Look at that, I made it. These are the things that you learn with this exercise. What works and what doesn't. The exercise continues here. Here we have a typical angle that we need to shorten a bit. All we need to do is use sufficient force. English shouldn't be necessary to make the shot, theoretically. Let's try that again. That's better. We will use a little English here. I don't think we can make this shot with this method. The ball is too close to the cushion. Perhaps if I use a cross shot. No, no chance. That is a shot that would be possible if the cue ball were here instead of there. Then I could hit the object ball square with right English. This, combined with the dynamic spin that the ball acquires, should send it into the pocket, while the cue ball stays out of the way.
Und das sind diese Dinge, die ihr quasi aus dieser Übung herausholen könnt. Und ja, wer natürlich Zeit hat, der versucht auf diesem Leistungslevel.
So these are the things that you learn with this exercise. Players who are serious about bang shots should work on this exercise until they actually make all 8 in a row. Give it a try. You will certainly discover a lot. The next part of the test after bank shots is standard position shots, the so-called standard position shots. The word standard does not mean that the shots are easy. Actually, they are somewhat difficult. Standard means that these are shots that often occur in a game. We will concentrate on the more extreme positions in this drill, because when we are proficient with them, then the easier positions will be no problem. In a moment, we will see how Torsten plays these standard position shots, but a reminder before we do. When you take the test, then you have 3 shots for every position. It will then be noted how often you have made the shot, 0, 1, 2, or 3 times. A passing grade here is not easy to achieve. In Pat 3, it is expected of you that you make all 3.
So, und das Themengebiet, das hier bei den Standardpositionsbällen im Wesentlichen behandelt wird, ist die Zyklik. Das heißt, sofern ihr die ersten 2 Bände noch nicht hinter euch gebracht habt.
The theme that should be encompassed in this exercise is, once again, our stroke procedure or cycle.
In Zyklen aufgeteilt habt.
This is something that we have discussed in the first 2 Pat editions, and if you have not done so up until now, then it is high time for you to develop a stroke cycle. To divide your stroke into a sequence of steps. The procedure we will guide you through consists of 7 steps, and they are: Step 1, get your perspectives. If your opponent has just missed his last shot, then getting your perspectives may mean walking once or twice around the table. If you are in the middle of a run, and you have your position on your next ball, then there is a lot less involved in getting your perspectives. In this case, for example, you might just get your perspective here. During this step, you also chalk up. Once again, step 1, get your perspectives. Step 2, imagine what should happen. Create a picture in your mind of the ball going into the pocket. The mind works with pictures, so your motor functions will now try to make that picture happen. To illustrate, perhaps the following has also happened to you. You make a shot, Perhaps you cut it a bit too thin and the ball bounces back and forth in the jaw of the pocket but doesn't fall in. And then you say, I knew that was going to happen. The mind works with pictures. In your mind's eye, you saw yourself missing the shot, and so you did. We just want to turn this process around and use it to make shots. Clear pictures of the ball going into the pocket. Clear pictures of the cue ball coming to rest with good position on the next ball. No pictures of things we don't want happening. So, the first step was getting perspectives and chalking up. The second step is visualizing what should happen, creating a picture in your mind. The third step is take your stance. The fourth step, swing, aim, and recheck everything. You can do this as long as you feel it is necessary. It is important that you go smoothly from this step to the fifth step, which is your stroke. Step 6, stay down. Step 7, step back. And then you start again from the beginning with your next shot. And step 1, I get my perspectives on my next ball. I don't add an 8th step, which might be to get upset, hit the rail with my cue, and mutter rude things under my breath. Rather, I want to proceed directly to my next step. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. You then develop a rhythm to your game. If, when you are working on standard position shots, you concentrate on this 7-step procedure, consciously considering each step as you go, then, later when you are playing a game, you won't have to think about it anymore. You'll do it automatically. Your game will have a natural rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There is a rhythm, a routine.
Dann müsst ihr euch auch nicht mehr darauf konzentrieren, das läuft dann alles automatisch ab. Und dann ist auch gewährleistet, dass ihr nicht zu schnell werdet, wie einige Spieler, die zum Beispiel so einen Ablauf nicht zyklisiert haben. Die werden dann
This routine will help you in a game. It will prevent you from playing too fast, too hectic. When this happens, then it is usually because you begin to leave some steps out. You don't get your perspectives anymore, which is essential. Then you don't stay down after your stroke. Some folks manage to play with only 3 or 4 steps.
Wesentlich ist, wenn ihr also das auf diese Art trainiert, dann ist gewährleistet, auch wenn ihr in einen Lauf kommt, auch wenn ihr voll intuitiv...
If you consciously work on this now, though, then you can be sure that you will later do this intuitively. Even if you are in the middle of a good inning and you are definitely not thinking about it anymore. You may go through the steps slowly, or you may do them quickly, but they are all there. Now let's watch how Torsten does this exercise. The next two exercises are frozen on the cushion exercises. We have already had similar exercises in the first two tests. We use all 15 balls for the first exercise. You start with the cue ball in the middle, and you can play the balls in any order that you like. You are only allowed to hit the ball that you are trying to pocket during each shot. If you pocket a ball, but you also hit another ball while you are doing it, then the pocketed ball does not count. You set up the exercise as it is described in our book. Here, 3, 3, and 3. Over here, 2, 2, and 2 on the cushion. Now we can see how Thorsten does this exercise. The second exercise is similar to the first, the only difference being that there is now a specific order in which the balls should be played. You set up the 15 in the middle, the 13 here in the diamond, also in the middle, and the 14 on this diamond. Then you begin with ball in hand. And you play the balls in order, just like Thorsten did. This exercise is a good opportunity for you to find out if it is better to hit the ball first or the cushion. Try each. Aim at the cushion, then try aiming at the ball. You are only allowed to hit the ball that you are trying to pocket. Play the balls in order. This exercise is a challenge. I'm coming quite close to the other balls.
Dann 5 und 6, 7,
5,
wenn man es
6,
geschafft hat,
7,
dann
and
ist man
8.
ganz gut dabei.
When I make those, then I'm doing quite well.
Der Sollwert
The
für
desired
beide
score for the
Übungen
two
zusammen
exercises
liegt
is
bei
10.0.
Das heißt,
That means that
wenn man
if
bei
I
der
pocketed a
ersten
lot of the
schon
balls in
mal
the
ein
first
paar
exercise, then I can
Wurfwerte
afford to miss a
vorgelegt
couple
hat,
of balls here.
dann kann man sich hier vielleicht den ein oder anderen Ausrutscher leisten. An der Stelle habe ich leider
Oops, I hit the cushion way too soon there.
und dann endet für mich.
So I will now end my demonstration so that we can watch how Torsten does this.
Wir schauen uns jetzt den Thorsten an, wie er die Sache durchgespielt hat.
So now you have completed PAT test number 3. I hope you're pleased with your grade. If not, then at least you know what you have to work on. Now we would like to make some additional comments, address a few subjects that are very important for playing professional billiard. The first topic we want to talk about is the break. There are a couple of facts that you should know, and it is important to be familiar with the physics that are involved. Andreas will discuss these things with you, and then I will demonstrate some breaks.
Okay, as Ralph said, we are going to get into physics again. Not too much, but it is important that we correct a few fairy tales that a lot of billiard players still seem to believe in. One of them, which often seems to occur in 9-ball, is the speed break or power break syndrome. Players will put too much speed or force into their break that the cue ball will actually leave skid marks on the table. You won't see any here because I don't break like that. This is our first fairy tale. The idea that enormous strength is necessary for a good break. That's wrong. Billiard has just about nothing to do with muscles. If strength were to play a role in billiard, then the game would have to include longer contact moments as well as longer contact distances. That is not the case. When a cue ball is hit with a cue stick or a ball is hit from another ball, then in the realm of physics, these contacts are called collisions. In Germany, we may spend up to a half of a year in physics class talking about collisions, and often billiard then becomes a topic that will be discussed in school. Without going into too much detail, the aspect of collisions that is especially important for us in billiard is the word impulse. Because the collisions between billiard balls are nearly elastic and the span of time that the contact occurs is very short, the word impulse is what best describes what happens when two billiard balls collide. Impulses can be mathematically defined. A simple formula for an impulse is mass times velocity. One advantage to billiard physics is that mass is always constant. The cue ball should have the same mass as the colored balls, so that the only variable in billiard is the velocity. That means that if I want to transfer more energy to a ball, then I have to increase its velocity. If I want to increase the effect or rotation that I put on the ball, then again, I need more velocity. In this case, more velocity is the cue. That is why we constantly put emphasis on the word speed instead of power or strength. That is why, when we are working on our stroke, we emphasize the need to accelerate through the ball. Acceleration until the anatomical end of our stroke. Velocity is especially important when we break, because we are trying to get at least 9 or up to 15 balls to move apart as much as possible. We have observed two problems that often develop with breaking. The first problem is disappointingly simple. Many billiard players can't shoot straight. That sounds shocking, but it is the truth. You recognize this when you try to play speed 3 or speed 4, if you are capable of keeping the ball in a straight line, or if you begin to accidentally put English on the ball or get sloppy with your stroke. That small inaccuracy can turn into a disaster when you're breaking a game of 9-ball. And instead of hitting the first ball square, you glance off the side of it with your cue ball. That is the first big problem. You should only begin to work on your break when you are capable of playing speed 4. Let's say that if you play speed 4 10 times, then you should be able to do 2 to 4 very well and an additional 5 times rather well. If you can do that, then it begins to make sense to work on your break. Otherwise, break training is just a matter of chance. Fundamental for a good break is a perfect stroke. The second problem that often occurs with breaking is even more shocking. Many do not achieve enough velocity. Ralph and I have often observed that many just don't shoot fast enough. I know that that is hard to believe, but it's the truth. To work on that, you begin by just shooting a ball as fast as you can, without turning the ball into a projectile and destroying something in the room. You shoot it across the table and into the corner pocket. Your stroke remains the same as ever. You don't have to choke up on the cue or stand up taller than usual. There is no need to make your break more complicated than it already is.
unser Queue zu zerstören.
I don't know why people do that, especially when the break is so
Nicht
important.
mit kürzer greifen, aufrechter
All we
stehen,
do
weil ich weiß
is
nicht, warum die
swing
meisten Leute
a
ihren
little
Break
bit.
komplizierter machen, wenn der Ball
And
noch
then we
wirklich
try to
richtig
move
ist.
the ball across the
Das heißt,
table
zuerst
as
machen wir
fast
den
as we
Ball
can.
anzuschwingen und dann versuchen wir einfach mal den Ball sehr schnell über den
You will
Tisch zu
notice when you're working on
Drehung,
this that this
Geschwindigkeit.
simple exercise
Ihr werdet beim
really
Trainieren
isn't
feststellen,
so simple.
dass allein schon dieser Versuch
You
gar
may
nicht
hurt
mal so
yourself,
einfach
you may
ist.
miss,
Und dass man sich dabei ganz gern mal wehtut, verreißt, daneben schießt. Das heißt, wir brauchen Schnellkraft. Wir brauchen die Schnellkraft.
we are
jetzt
trying
nicht
to
nur
develop
einfach
and
da
utilize
stehen
the
und
fast
ganz
twitch
schnell die
muscles
Gefühl
in
nach
our
vorne
arm
kriegen. Also
and transfer
im
this
Stoß,
energy to the cue.
billardtechnisch gesehen, wir brauchen die Schnellkraft vor allem im Arm. In der Sportphysiognomie oder im Sporttraining gibt
There's
es
a
einen
modern
Trainingszweig,
field of
der
sport
sich
medicine that
nur
deals with
damit
the development of
beschäftigt,
very fast motions called plyometric training.
nennt sich insgesamt dann
If you're
plyometrisches
interested in
Training.
this,
Wer von euch
then
mal
you should
Interesse
probably
daran
go
hat,
to a sport
sollte zu irgendeinem
physiotherapist
Sportphysiotherapeuten gehen und einfach
and
mal
ask him
fragen,
how
was
you
er
can
tun
develop
dass sich
quickness
seine
in upper
Oberarmmuskulatur
arms.
oder die Oberarmmotorik
One thing we want to
schneller
remember
bewegen
is
kann.
not to hold the cue
Denkt
with a
immer
vice
dran,
grip.
wir wollen
Holding the
nicht
cue with a
das
very
Queue
strong grip
greifen wie einen
will
Schraubstock.
just slow your
Allein
movements.
das Greifen
It is
wie ein
impossible
Schraubstock
to
sorgt
move
dafür,
taut
dass die
tendons
Bewegung
very
langsamer werden
fast.
wird. Es ist nicht möglich,
We want to hold the
durchgezogene
cue
Sehnen so
like we
schnell zu
always
bewegen.
do,
Das heißt,
with a
wir wollen
relaxed
weiter unseren
grip.
ganz normalen Griff haben, das Queue ganz normal
We make
locker
every
laufen
other
lassen, wie
shot
jeden
that
anderen
way.
Ball
Why
hingehen.
shouldn't
Warum
this
sollte
work
beim
with your
Break
break
nicht
as well?
funktionieren? Also, grundsätzlich
So the
ist
following is of
die
fundamental
Energie, die ich
importance.
aufbringen kann,
The energy that I'm
um so einen
trying to
Dreieck zu
transfer
übertragen,
to
in
the
eine
cue
Raute zu
ball
übertragen,
is
ist
velocity.
Geschwindigkeit.
The more
Je höher
velocity
meine
that I produce,
Geschwindigkeit ist,
but
die
at the same
ich
time
möglichst
shooting
geradlinig, die
straight without
Fähigkeit,
inadvertently
über den
putting
Tisch
English on the
transportieren
ball,
kann, ohne
without
mir
hurting
dabei weh zu tun,
myself,
ohne zu
the
verkrampfen,
better my break will be.
desto besser wird mein Break sein,
It will be
desto
more
effektiver
effective.
wird das Break sein. Und zwar jetzt gar nicht so sehr abhängig davon,
What does
ob
not
Sie
play a
alles
large
auf dem
role in
Press
the
stehen wie du.
effectiveness of the
Dieses
break
ganze
is how
Verspannen der
tight the
Bälle, was
balls
uns an
are
sehr vielen
pressed
Spielern
into
sieht,
each other in the
dient
rack.
hauptsächlich dazu, dass man furchtbar fest
The only
draufhauen kann und
thing
das Eck immer noch
that it will
ausgeht.
do is
Deswegen
enable
werden
the
Kugeln
player
verspannt
breaking to open the
gegenseitig.
triangle when he puts enough
Nicht, weil
speed
das
on
so
the
sein
ball.
muss. 14:1
When playing
bekommt man auch Bälle,
14-1,
die
many
locker
players
aneinander
achieve a
stehen
high-quality
und
break
viel
with
Qualität
loosely
und nicht
racked
mit brachialer
balls.
Gewalt. Da würde auch niemand auf die Idee kommen, das mit brachialer Gewalt zu breaken. So, nun vielleicht,
Before we
bevor wir
watch
uns aber
Ralph
Ralf anschauen,
demonstrate
wie
some
ein bisschen
breaks,
Breaks und etwas
there
vom
is perhaps
Wellenbreak
one last
ist,
word to our
noch
physics class.
eine andere
Let's take a look at our
wissenschaftliche Sache.
triangle in 8-ball.
Wenn wir uns
The triangle
das Dreieck
has one
anschauen,
single relevant symmetrical
dann zeigt das
axis.
Dreieck
If I want to
wunderschön
dismember or
Markierungen auf
break
dem
this
Tisch,
form into its
dass ein
individual
Dreieck,
parts,
sprich
then I
Achtung,
do
über
so
eine
by
einzige
working
Symmetrie
towards its
abbildet.
axis of symmetry.
Man kann aber
That means
Körper einfach
that
am
if I'm
besten
trying to
aus
get maximum
Einzelteilen
dispersion
bestehenden
of the
Körper am besten
balls,
dadurch
the
zerlegen,
individual
dass
parts
man
of
in
this
Richtung
form,
der
then I
Symmetrie
don't have to
abschneidet.
shoot directly in line with the
Das heißt,
axis of
wenn auch
symmetry,
maximale Verteilung der
directly
Kugeln
at the
losgeht,
corner.
man muss nicht senkrecht
That
auf
may
den
be
Dreieck
mathematically
schießen.
correct.
Das wäre vielleicht
The most
mathematisch das
energy
Beste,
effective
aber
impulse
zumindest
is one
ist die
that is in
Krafteinwirkung auf
almost
das
line
Dreieck
with the
nicht zu
axis of
zerlegen.
symmetry.
Von irgendeinem
That
Punkt
is
von
certainly
relativ
better in a
flach
game of
in
8-ball
Richtung die
than
Symmetrie
shooting
abzunehmen.
way
Mit
from the
Sicherheit
side.
am Achtball besser als von der Seite.
Of course, Ralph is going to
Effektiver ist
show
unser
you some
Leistungssport.
exceptions
Wir
to the
jetzt nur
rule,
mal um Grundlagen.
but for
Wenn wir
now,
neuen Ball
we just
anschauen,
want to
die
understand the
Bälle ja
basic principles
als Raute
involved.
aufgebaut sind.
Now, if we take a look at 9-ball, where the balls are set up in a rhombic or a diamond form, a rhombus has different geometrical properties than a triangle. A rhombus has two axes, one thought to the length
Das heißt,
and one
eine
through the
Raute zu
width.
breaken, es
That
gibt
means
ideale
that there is no ideal spot
Es ist
to
nicht so,
break
dass man
from
auf
in
der Mitte
9-ball.
einen Ball besser öffnen kann als von der
You
Seite.
can't say that it is better to break from the side or from the middle. The ideal spot would be exactly between the two axes, so maybe from the side would be a little bit better. Unfortunately, breaking from the table next to the one you're playing on is not allowed, because there we would probably find the perfect position to break from. We will probably always break from this area, a little off-center. Is it better to break from the rail? The angle that you strike the cue ball from is probably better. The problem often is that many have difficulties to shoot like that. All you have to do is to look at some billiard tables.
Die Problematik ist, die meisten Spieler, die versuchen von der Bande zu breaken,
Look at the marks on it, the scars and abrasions on the felt, the white marks and the scratches. These reveal a tendency that many have that when they break from the rail, that they actually shoot a small jump ball. The cue ball lands and is supposed to hit the front corner. That should not happen. If you decide to play from the rail, then you should make sure not to break like this, at such a steep angle, because the cue ball will definitely jump. Rather, you want to keep your cue low as you usually would, and you want to break with a long, fast stroke. The last bit of advice I would like to give you is, when I was a teenager, we had a rule for breaking. It was called the red and white ring rule. We were of the opinion that when you break, it is important to put a lot of weight onto your bridge hand. That would transfer more energy into the table. Even if we were playing from the rail, we would press with our fingers so that you would see a red and a white ring on them. This may be a tiny bit of help in keeping yourself stationary while trying to move your arm very fast. Otherwise, your body will tend to move a lot, especially at the end of your stroke. Many tend to pull back with their bodies when they follow through. All of that is lost energy. We want our energy on the table. Put weight on your bridge hand. With this small trick, you may find that you are able to increase the velocity of your break. Don't forget, all of this is pointless if your stroke isn't straight. Now it's Ralph's turn.
First, we want to examine the 9-ball break more closely. For training purposes, it would be good for you to rack up the balls in numerical order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and of course the 9 is in the middle. That way, if you continually sink a ball, you can tell if it is always the same one, and where it came from. Otherwise, it could take years to figure out what is going on when you break. That is to say that much of what we know about breaking actually did take years to figure out. As mentioned before, if you have a good stroke technique, then it is of little importance how tight the balls were pressed into the rack. Perhaps the only real reason to worry about that would be that if you break from here, then there is a small chance that the 1 ball will fall into the side pocket. That chance only exists if the 1 is pressed against the 3. If there is even a tiny space between the 1 and the 3, then it will never fall into the pocket. It will always come up too short. The same is true if you are breaking from the other side. Which ball has the greatest chance of falling into a pocket? Which ball can we control the most? From this side, it would be the 4, and from that side, the 5. The pocketing average of a corner ball like that is about 50 to 60%. But in a game, on a table that you are familiar with, where the balls are consistently racked the same, and you continually make the same break, let's say in a long inning, then the statistic is certainly higher, so that from perhaps 11 breaks, you could make 10. But in break training, when you break over 100 times, the average stays around 50 to 60%. So, let's take a look at a break. As mentioned, the 4 ball has the highest chance of being pocketed, 50 to 60%. The 1 isn't too bad either, perhaps 25 to 30%, depending on the table, you may get it into the side pocket. We don't want to concentrate on the 1 though, because first of all, the chances are higher for the corner ball. Second of all, if one of the corner balls gets pocketed, and the 1 ends up near the side pocket, and the cue ball stays in the middle like I want it to, then I have a good position on my next shot. I mean, it's nice if the 1 ball falls, I don't complain. But it is better if one of the corner balls sink, and I have position on my first shot. The problem is that only the 1 ball and the 9 ball have specific positions in the rack. The other balls can be racked randomly. So when a corner ball gets pocketed on the break with some consistency, you might not notice it. You only notice the 1 ball. So let's give it a shot. And it is important to note that if the corner ball doesn't fall, then we want to know where it went so that we can adjust our next break. So the corner did fall, and the 1 ball fell as well. I wasn't able to keep the cue ball in the middle, but I still have a good position on the 2, and I could continue with the 3. Let's look at a couple more breaks. It would have actually been better for demonstration purposes if the corner ball had not fallen in the pocket, because then we could discuss what went wrong and how to adjust the break. Let's say that the corner ball misses the pocket by going over to this side just a little bit. Then I can decide if I want to adjust by putting more velocity, more energy into my stroke in order to push it over that last little bit or not. Perhaps the difference is too great and I can't get enough velocity into my break to get the corner ball to the pocket. If the ball goes by on this side of the pocket, then I don't have much chance to compensate. Maybe the rack was made so poorly that I should try again. But if the balls are consistently racked up well, and my corner ball goes by on this side of the pocket, then the only real solution would be to change sides and to try to pocket the 5. If the ball goes over here, then I could also try to reduce the velocity of my break. That, of course, is a very easy solution. It is important to note that when the table is new, or the table has a new felt on it, and if the balls are new or highly polished, then the balls will react differently. If the corner ball goes over there, then you have to increase the velocity. If it goes over here, then you have to reduce it. It actually does have something to do with the amount of surface fat on the balls. These are properties that are different depending on which billiard salon you are playing in, which club or which tournament. That is why, when you are playing on a table that is new for you, you have to observe where that corner ball goes and determine how to adjust your break. Now we want to take a look at some break possibilities, shot more from the middle of the table, as from the side. As you may have noticed, many professionals like to break from the side. I am not exactly sure why. It is said that you have the best chances of sinking the corner ball if you break from the side. Perhaps this trend will change someday. If, for example, your corner ball misses the pocket on this side, then you could also compensate by moving your break more towards the middle. Let's watch where the 1 ball goes when I break from the middle. One other problem connected with a break from the middle is the danger of setting the cue ball in the side pocket.
Wird selten bevorzugt. Das hat auch seinen Grund darin, dass wenn ich breake,
When the cue ball hits the larger mass of balls, then it will deflect. And if you don't hit the one ball directly, rather, let's say you hit it a little to the left, then the cue ball could very well roll into the side pocket to the left. That, of course, would be fatal. But in this case, if you would strike the one ball a little to the right, then the cue ball will roll into the cushion here. And that wouldn't be good. And it may even then roll back into the middle of the table, which is what we want. And you are increasing the chances of pocketing the corner ball when you aim toward the inside. When you aim more towards the outside, then you have a higher risk of scratching, and you reduce the chance that the corner ball will fall. A break shot directly from the middle could cause the cue ball to fall into either of the side pockets. Even though the chances of a miscue are greater when you shoot from the middle, it is still worth it to work on it. If you can get one of those corner balls to fall, and you can do that with some consistency, then it would actually be the break of choice. Why? When you break from the middle, you will always break up the rack much better, and your one ball will have a much better position. When I break from here, the one ball will roll towards the side pocket. The more I move my cue ball over here, though, the more the one ball will roll over here. That is certainly a wonderful position to begin your frame from. So let's observe the way the path of the one ball has changed. The one ball went where we expected it to. The cue ball, unfortunately, did not stay in the middle, but I have a good position on the one. My position on the two is not that good. I did pocket a ball. Which one was it? Now we see how important it is to rack the balls in numerical order when we are training. It was the 4. So I was able to pocket a corner ball shooting from the middle. If you are able to do that as well, then this would certainly be a good alternative to breaking from the side.
Dann kommen wir vom 9-Ball natürlich zum 8-Ball.
Now let's take a look at 8-ball. There isn't much more to say about the break in 8-ball. Andreas already discussed the physical principles involved. One question that remains is, though, which ball, statistically speaking, gets pocketed the most on the break? Is there a ball that has a higher potential for being sunk?
Die Antwort ist in erster Linie, es gibt keine.
The simple answer to that question is no. There is no specific ball that has a dramatically higher chance of falling, as in the case in 9-ball. But there are a few that are somewhat more likely to fall than others. In 9-ball, we said that there was a 50 to 60% chance of pocketing one of the corner balls. The best forecast we can make in 8-ball is a 30% chance of pocketing one of the balls directly behind the one ball. The way I have racked the balls here, that would mean either the 7 or the 6. When I break an 8-ball, then I usually break from about here, halfway from where I broke before, almost in line with this diamond. I do this because when I break more from the side, then I have noticed that the balls don't spread very well. They tend to stay down here. If I break from the middle, then of course there is a higher potential of scratching. So that is why many players tend towards a halfway to the left or a halfway to the right break. These, of course, are just observations and tendencies. You will certainly observe other methods as well. The foremost ball also has a good chance of falling on the break, especially if I'm breaking from the side. Then it may have as good a chance of falling in the side pocket as the one ball. Because of the higher amount of mass in the 8-ball rack, they receive more deflective energy and tend to roll wide of the pocket. If that is the case, then you could reduce the velocity of your break a bit to bring the path more towards the pocket, but the rack wouldn't break as well. But if we are working with more velocity in an 8-ball break, and we move more towards the center with our cue ball, then the first ball will roll over here, and the second ball has a greater chance of falling into the side pocket, and, at the same time, surprisingly enough, the 6 over here. Both will at least come very close to the pockets. Let's observe this now. Keep your eye on the 6, the green ball, and the 7, the red one. So this time, the 3 fell into the pocket, and it was even joined by a friend. I'm not really sure where the 7 went. I think it was a bit too short of the pocket and too slow, but the 3 was a success. You always have a good chance with at least one of the 2. It is important to watch those 2 balls, so that if they don't fall, you can at least determine where they went. Was the ball too wide of the pocket or too short? If you are too short of the pocket, then try moving your cue ball more towards the center. If you are wide, then move your cue ball away from the center. That way you have at least one ball that you can consciously work with. And you can hope for the random ball that everyone else is hoping for as well. I hope that was of interest. That should be enough for this exercise.
At the end of this DVD, I would just like to discuss one method for saves and resaves. These are, generally speaking, shots where the cue ball must travel long distances, and especially in the case of resaves, these are instances where we are trying to get the cue ball to come to a stop, touching another object. The first thing to consider, as usual, is to get back to the basics. Consider what happens with a stop shot. We try to get the cue ball to release all of its energy into the object ball, so that after contact, there is no energy left in the cue ball. This provides us with a simple method for practicing saves where we are trying to hide the cue ball behind another object ball. I will demonstrate this by aiming at a pocket, which of course doesn't make sense when practicing saves, but we're just interested in the method right now. I'm going to try to hide my cue ball behind the 9 by shooting at the 6 with a stop ball. It shouldn't be all that difficult to leave a little bit of energy in the cue ball. Now, if I aim at the 6 so that the point of contact is just a little bit to the right, and there is still a tiny bit of energy in the cue ball, just a tiny bit, then that was a bit too much. That is why we call this practicing. That is how a save is played, where the cue ball is left directly on another ball. This can be done anywhere on the table. Naturally, this can also be done as a draw. If I want the cue ball to go from here to here, then, once again, I want it to transfer almost all of its energy to the object ball. So I am just about playing a stop shot. Then again, I aim to the side a bit. I make sure that it rolls back a little. Once more, I have my cue ball directly on another ball. One mistake that many players make, and I think Ralph has noticed the same thing, is that they seem to think that a safety play involves enormous amounts of English and finesse. Well, that's wrong. If I tried to use English to get my cue ball over to that 9, then it certainly still would have had energy, and so it wouldn't have stopped at the 9. Rather, it would have hit the 9 and pushed it away. We can try to demonstrate this, which is something that coaches have difficulty with, demonstrating the wrong way to make a shot. Here we go. With enormous amounts of English and finesse.